it's definitely really challenging to be able to harmoniously bring all that together. You have these different teams that all create friction with one another. You have the security team, which is known as the team of no. Developers don't actually get to kind of be part of the solution or understand why this is a problem. There's operations teams. Oh my God, why are the developers doing this? The solutions are not harmonious. And so this is kind of like where I feel very passionate about is that we need to have these conversations from day one.
Welcome. My name is Sean O'Dell, and welcome to my first episode, and I believe the second episode of the Mission Control podcast. I am brand new at Spacelift. I lead the developer relations team. I'm actually the head of developer relations. Really excited to join the team, and really excited to get in today's episode. And I am glad to welcome Mackenzie. Mackenzie, give us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get this thing going, man.
Yeah, sure. Well, great to be here, Sean. It's awesome to be on the podcast. I have to give a shout out to the name. It's I think this is the best podcast name imaginable. As you said, I'm Mackenzie. So I'm actually in DevRel as well. I'm working in developer relations for a company called GitGuardian. So, I mean, I first started off as a founder. I was a CTO of a health tech startup, which is still around and kicking today, called Compago. And when I left that, I was kind of, it really taught me a lot about security, being in that health space, building robust apps. I really loved that and wanted to kind of focus on that for the rest of my career. So I started working for GitGuardian. We're a security company that specializes in securing source code and more specifically making sure that we can keep secrets like API keys and passwords out of our source code, out of our Git repositories. So I've been with GitGuardian for just over for 2 years now, and just kind of being an advocate and tooting the horn for DevSecOps and getting developers interested in security and providing the right kind of tools to make that possible.
Very cool. I know I'm glad to have you, and that does not sound like a Texas accent. So where are you based, Mackenzie? Where are you from, brother?
It's a confusing. Okay, so I'm from New Zealand, but I live mostly between Paris in France and a city called Utrecht in the Netherlands. So I kind of do half and half between those two. But I don't know where my accent is from now. Pretty much every country, every person in the world, I have an accent to. And if you think that I have an accent now, you should hear me trying to speak French. I think that then you will hear an accent.
All right, very fair. Well, no, I mean it's good to jump on with you. I think that's one of the fun parts about being a developer relations or advocacy in general is just really working with folks like yourself all over the world. We come from different backgrounds, different aspects and walks of life. And what you probably didn't know, and I probably should have told you before you actually got on a podcast with me, is I have uploaded one of my coworkers' AWS keys to GitHub. I didn't know that it was buried in the Jenkins code. And yes, it was a public repository. So sorry.
Man, this happens way more than you would even think. I can tell you right now that you are not alone in this. Every year we publish a report on how many credentials we find in public Git repositories. So GitGuardian scans every single commit throughout the year. So last year we scanned about a little over 1 billion commits, and we found 6 million credentials. So you're definitely not alone in that.
Very, very fair. So you mentioned GitGuardian, right? In my case, I tend to come from originally I came from the infrastructure side of the house. And then grew fond of the application and the application development side of the house. And so, I tend to come from the infrastructure to applications. It sounds like in your case, you're probably coming from a little bit of the application side but you really need infrastructure. So tell me a little bit about GitGuardian and kind of just the landscape and where you fit into it.
Yeah, so I mean, GitGuardian is kind of a solution that fits into a lot of different areas. So we're hyper focused on of detecting credentials. It's actually a lot harder than you think because credentials are probabilistic and they may be high entropy strings, but most high entropy strings are not secret. So you have to really analyze all of the code in different points to be able to detect them correctly. And we come at it from a couple of areas. So, for your security teams, um, we have dashboards and products for them to be able to monitor their source code and kind of get visibility over where their secrets are, where the API keys are. But then on my side, we're really focused in on that developer bottom up area as well, where we kind of create these open source tools that fit into your CLI that can kind of implement Git hooks or other areas so that the developers can prevent leaking secrets in as well. And then you have that those operational teams, because I think people forget about that. There's a lot of secrets that ops guys and the infrastructure guys have to handle, and and that can be really really challenging in getting that all right. We find a lot of secrets in YAML files and
Oh
and
yeah.
everything. So this is a problem that kind of needs to fit across the entire software development lifecycle, and it's a product that is part of a security, is part of like a security program. I hate the vendors that kind of pretend to be this magic bullet solution for everything. We are very good at doing one thing that fits across many different teams. But it's going to be part of, maybe you have some dynamic application security testing, maybe you have some open source vulnerability detection. Different different tools out there, and this will be one of them that fits together. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And I'm glad you mentioned that there is no one tool that fits them all. I also, I guess my previous 2 or 3 years, I focused in the security space around infrastructure as code at a couple of different iterations. Obviously, I'm concerned about that now in my role at Spacelift. But the one thing I've always come back to is we are providing solutions that meet developers where they are, right? And you mentioned it, utilizing good hooks, utilizing basically the interfaces that developers are accustomed to, right? Whether it's VS Code,
Oh yeah.
in their SCM, right? Rather than, hey, here's my cool new little screen, you need to use it. And we're not going to integrate in any form or fashion into what you're doing as your day in and day out development, right? So I have a huge passion for that. It sounds like you have a huge passion for that. And that leads me to my first question. And I think this is a fun question, right? Because we're wanting to meet developers where they are. But I often hear, like, we have way too many acronyms. And why do we need DevSecOps? Or why don't we just say DevOps and encompass that with security? So real quick, what are your thoughts on DevSecOps, the use of sec or security inside of ops or DevOps? And we'll just start this debate, fight, or agreement, whatever this turns into.
I thought we agreed we weren't going to go any polarizing political topics this time. No, I think it's important. I get that everyone kind of gets tired of these new acronyms coming out where it feels like, and then someone describes it to you, and it's like, yeah, like, in other words, what we've been doing for a while. But I think it's important because it kind of describes how these teams fit together. Security hasn't really kept up with just the agile way of development that we're kind of used to, and it's been lingering a bit. And kind of like that DevSecOps thing, to me, it encompasses what really it should be, and that's this one. This is one function. Security is within our devs, security is in our operations teams. Doesn't necessarily mean that it looks the same for everyone, but it means that there's a shared responsibility of security, of operations with everyone, and making sure that we have a secure, smoothly running application from the design stage all the way through and every iteration thereafter.
Fair. It sounds like to me there's a shared responsibility model. Now that's a term I think we overuse in a lot of ways. But I go back to a conversation. I was actually in London. This would have been 4.5 years ago. meeting with a, Fortune 10 financial institution. This was the CTO and CISO, and he's like, "Yeah, I just had a meeting, and an application, team came in, and they highlighted their new application. They were ready to go, to launch it and put it on the public-facing internet. And we looked at him and said, 'Have you passed any sort of security, any of the security checks or guardrails?'" And they looked at him and were like, "What? I don't know what you're talking about." Right. So I mean, that was a couple of years ago now, but that example still happens today, where there is a disconnect between app dev, operations, and security. Right. So kind of detail that a little bit of what you have seen and ways to be successful in bringing this all together.
Yeah, it's definitely really challenging to be able to harmoniously bring all that together. So, I mean, what you kind of see in the industry is that you have these different teams that all create friction with one another if you haven't implemented kind of a shared responsibility model. You have the security team, which is known as the team of no, but may not provide answers as to why. The developers feel like they're just making their life more difficult, and they don't actually and developers don't actually get to kind of be part of the solution or understand why this is a problem. It's just kind of like no, and we find the same thing with those operations teams that kind of, oh my god, why are the developers doing this? This is creating so much more load, or and the solutions are not harmonious, and they don't have conversations at the beginning stages. And so this is kind of like where I feel very passionate about, is that we need to have these conversations from day one. We need to get developers and security teams in the room, and we need to talk about the type of like vulnerabilities that developers can take ownership over. And we also need to provide the tooling for the ops teams and developers teams so that they can take on some responsibility for security, because you touched on it before. We have to fit this into their workflow, right? No one's sitting here saying that developers or ops guys or security guys don't have enough to do, right? And now you have to add this
Yeah.
new thing in. It's not about creating more work, because ultimately it speeds up the process. It's about kind of having discussions, talking about it, why this is a problem. And then when a developer faces a block, then if they can't use this package because it has a vulnerability, if they can't, if their pull request was blocked because they're containing secrets, right? They understand why. They understand why this is an issue. And they have tooling on their side, which allows them to fix it without having to talk to the scary security guys, or, like that. So it's about bringing everyone together and reducing this friction where everyone feels like everyone's just out against each other.
Oh yeah, it's funny. We've been doing this in the industry for years. I mean, even when I was on the customer side many years ago, I mean, we would go to, I'm in infrastructure. I'd go with my app dev representative. We'd go to at the time, in that case, it was the network team, and the network team was like, "Nope, can't do it." And we're like, "Wait a minute, you're not even going to listen to the conversation. You're going to understand. You're just going to flat out say no, right?" And so having those teams and having that friction is nothing new, right? But now that it seems like in some cases, or we've made some progress in some areas. Now we kind of like to, in ways, pick on security at times, or maybe they pick on us, one of the two. How does incorporating DevOps or DevSecOps into the software development lifecycle really come to light if we do this correctly, if we do this in a way that makes sense to the organization? What does that look like for you?
So, I mean, I think what it really means is just like a complete step away from the waterfall approach in everything that we're doing. So not just from development, but also kind of through that whole process. It's about everyone having conversations at each point, and there never being a kind of a handoff. Like, we're not going to hand off this application. Like, okay, we've built our application, now it's ready to go to operations, and now operations, it's ready to go to security. Like, it's a continuous project, right? That continuous integration, continuous deployment. We're going through the whole cycle, and at each point, everyone has a say, and everyone has responsibilities over what they can do to make the process faster. Because the minute that something has to go to a team and then come back, like, not only have you annoyed everyone, you've wasted so much more time, and it's infinitely more complicated to kind of retrofit, like retro, kind of. I've forgotten how to speak English for a minute. Retroactively fix issues,
Yeah.
once they've been built into that design into it. So I think if you're going to have successful DevSecOps, then we have the three teams working together. They have a say at each point of the design, and that when it comes to our final checks, everything's already been worked on together. Everyone knows everything. And if there is still an issue, then we know immediately how to get back to it. And so I think that's like what it looks like in a successful organization. It's smoother, it's faster, everyone's friendlies, and once the application is deployed, you can all go off and have beers and everyone's still friends.
I probably should have started this off or started this this thought off at the beginning, but I actually think in some ways, because of the friction that has happened, whether it's organic or man-made or made up, right, or perception versus reality, I actually think security plays a significant part in this process. They have a skill set that I may not have. And it's, in some cases I do, right? I maybe I do, maybe I don't, but maybe I'm an application developer and all I care about is Golang, and that is it, right? I have a few libraries that I work in, but I know nothing about the overall security posture, right? So I believe security has a skill set that we should bring to the table, we should incorporate. That being said, what are ways that we can try and maybe bridge the gap or welcome security or give them an equal spot at the table?
Yeah. Look, definitely, I think everyone has something to bring to the table. I think
Good.
one of the processes and making sure that security is heard, is to, I guess we need to have different types of security at different areas. And what I know that developers really react well to is kind of learning about security in a way that really affects them. Showing them how you can do a malicious takeover from some insecure code. Showing them in real time, how cross-site scripting works or how you can inject something in there, because then everyone becomes invested in this and it's interesting. But if security kind of can continue to talk in their own language, and I know, I'm very passionate about security, and I'm guilty of doing this myself and kind of talking off in jargon terms that no one understands. It makes us feel really important, and no one can decipher what we're saying. So we feel really smart.
Oh yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's not really helping anyone. So I think that's one step where security can actually come in and show what they're doing and how it affects the developers. I think it all needs to relate to everything, because we're not going to take away security's role or operations role, but people need to be invested in seeing how it affects them, right? We're not going to teach a developer how to be a security engineer, but we can take the portion of security that really affects them and shine a light on it. And then the other area is that security has a whole bunch of blocking tools, that cause all kinds of that are havoc and disrupt, kind of disrupt the development workflow. So we need to give developers their versions of the security tools, and they need to kind of be on board with how they work. And my experience from endless conversations like this and implementing this in actuality is that developers are interested. No one wants to kind of be blocked, and it's embarrassing if it is a real vulnerability. So give them tools that fit into their CLI, that fit into VS Code, that fit into whatever they're using, that they can use to be able to kind of make progress on their own. And one example is that we did a rollout with a company, around about 1,000 devs, and we implemented some tools for the developers, and we reduced the amount of kind of incidents that the AppSec team had to deal with by 85%, because a lot of it was not fundamentally terrible stuff. It's just little mistakes or little things that can create big problems. So we need to kind of sort that out.
Yeah, I'm a human. I think we all are that are working in this space, and we are going to make mistakes. We can do everything we can to put, you know, guardrails in place, but a guardrail is very different than a roadblock.
Hmm.
I go back to I was blessed or cursed, depending on how you look at this, to work in the old school change board ITSM days, right? Where we wanted to propose a change and we had to wait 2 weeks for the next change control meeting. And we'd get in the room and everybody would say, "What are you doing?" And you'd give them the rundown, and there'd be one person in the room and be like, "No, I'm not really ready for that yet." And so it would be another 2 weeks before we get back in, right? And so in the case of DevSecOps, and this is something I continue to want to just almost continue to speak and say it as loud as possible, is there's a difference between a reactive tool and a proactive tool. And security can be very proactive in a lot of ways. Where if I have, whether it's infrastructure as code or new libraries that I'm implementing or creation of new containers that are a part of my application, I don't necessarily have to wait for another human to interact and tell me that this code is insecure, this container is insecure, or this infrastructure that you're building is insecure. Right? You can create proactive steps and measures ahead to where if I just go do it, just a simple merge, I don't even have to wait for somebody to come around and say, "No, you can't do that." It can actually give me the results inside of whatever my SCM tool is, and then I my productivity never stops as a developer, right? And I think that's one of the keys to being proactive versus reactive, and not being a roadblock, but actually providing some stable guardrails, which are okay. And so for me, I think it's great that you're kind of bringing it, at least the conversation around DevSecOps puts an emphasis on security and gives us something to talk about rather than something to full stop. Nope. You do your thing and then bring it to us. And that just creates a
Yeah.
lot of friction and a lot of unnecessary headache for all of us.
Yeah. No, I totally, completely agree. And, and that's it. And that's about kind of getting everyone in the same room, getting everyone to kind of communicate and become friends. And I think that process makes so much sense, and it's so much smoother when it's implemented.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's not an easy thing. It's not a difficult thing either. I think we put a lot more, I think we create a lot more friction than necessary. Man, Mackenzie,
mm,
I've appreciated the conversation. I know it's we try to keep these short, quick, to the point, and I think we've highlighted a very important and valuable topic today. What are some things, 2 or 3 tips that you could give to somebody maybe that's on the DevOps side and is struggling to get their security team involved, or somebody that's on the security side that's struggling to get a seat at the table for the DevOps side? And this will close us out. So it's all on you.
well, I think like when you're in the operations and trying to communicate to security, I think, or even vice versa. I think everyone, when we're kind of talking, if you want to propose new changes that you think, then to talk about it in a language that affects the other person's job, so we can reduce the amount of vulnerabilities being sent to you. We can speed up the operational times here. We can remove this human element. And when you're talking to each other in ways like that, then you're doing a couple of things, right? You're acknowledging that their time's valuable. We're acknowledging that what they're doing is important, and then you can actually make that step to move forward. And and if you're in the ops team and you're getting frustrated by security always being the team of no's, then be proactive and have a look at what security measures that you can implement to kind of get rid of some of their work and some of that interaction. Can you put something in the CI/CD pipeline to check your containers, make sure that you don't have
Good.
secrets in your Docker images, or make sure other areas like that, and remove that and be part of that conversation and kind of extend the olive branch because I know that a lot of y'all aren't friends at the moment, but I think it's time that we move past that.
No, that makes perfect sense, right? It's a mutual respect, mutual appreciation, and if we meet each other where we are, it just helps alleviate a lot of the struggle, and makes the entire process even better than when it started. So, Mackenzie, man, I appreciate you coming on today. We may end up jumping on at a later time and do like an office hours, a demo, or some crazy stuff at the command line and actually get into the weeds. And I look forward to that. If it's not you, maybe somebody else from your team. But really do appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, excellent. It was an awesome conversation. Thanks, Sean. I appreciate being invited.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody, for joining Mission Control podcast. I know I'm excited about what we're doing here, and really look forward to the next episode. So stay tuned, and we'll see you then.
Mission Control is brought to you by the team at Spacelift. Spacelift is a missing layer of collaboration and automation for DevOps teams who write infrastructure as code. If you'd like to learn more, please visit us at www.spacelift.io or follow us on Twitter at spacelift.io.